Hubert Clark was best known as one of the pallbearers for President John F. Kennedy. He lived in Johns Creek and through his life shared that experience more times than he could count. Today, loved ones shared experiences about his life, honoring him. He passed away December 1st. He's now buried in the Georgia National Cemetery in Canton. Friends and family shared a lot of memories of him during an online service today. Clark's name was etched in history in 1963 as a member of the U.S. Navy Ceremonial Guard when JFK was assassinated. He would later write a book detailing his experience that added to the mystery around that day. You can leave well wishes for Mr. Clark's family on the Ingram Funeral Home's YouTube page.